Hey, welcome everyone to today's live stream. Before I begin, as always, if somebody can do me a quick favor, let me know that you can hear me okay, and we will begin today's live stream. We do have a few people from Caspio looking at the chat as well, so if you have any questions or feedback or comments, definitely let us know. But before I begin, as usual, let me know that you can hear me okay inside the chat window, and we will begin with today's content. All right, excellent. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all. I know a lot of familiar names from previous live streams, so welcome back. And today's live stream is all about learning how to customize our reports. Now, this is a very heavy topic today. There's a lot of content to cover. There's no possible way for me to show you everything in 1 hour that we have, but I have picked some good content for today's live stream, and we're going to explore different ways of how we can customize these reports to make them look both aesthetically and visually appealing, and also from the functionality perspective, making sure that our end users are able to interact with these reports in a clear and concise way. All right. So if you have any suggestions that you would like to see in these live streams, definitely let us know in the chat window. We always collect your feedback. I know we did a few sessions before on HTML and CSS. Today will be no different. We're going to be looking at some ways of how we can use that HTML and CSS technique to display the data in a certain way on the reports. So today will be no different. And we're also going to be looking at standard features in Caspio, how we can customize our reports. So with that said, let's go ahead and begin. So let me give you a quick overview of what we're going to be covering in today's live stream. So we're going to be looking at different ways of using a predefined criteria to filter data. So we're going to be looking at contacts for today, this week, this month, how we can customize the search form to include different elements using autocomplete, cascading, range, date range, all the different ways that you may have not discovered on your own when it comes to the ability to search data. The next thing that we're going to look at is how do we take the gallery report, a data that looks like this. You can see this is all using standard features in Caspio to display the data, and how by applying some simple HTML and CSS rules, we can turn that to look like this, where we have some nice and even spacing. Everything is cohesive, there's good continuity behind it, and we can also display our social media icons and have a much nicer button compared to the default button provided by Caspio. And the last thing we're going to look at today is how we can use JavaScript to change the status background color. So if the status is a customer, it can look green. If it's a lead, it can be yellow. And if it's a prospect, I think I have a orange reddish color applied to it. Also, when I talk about colors, as you may be aware from the previous live streams, I am colorblind, so when I mention colors, take that with a grain of salt. Okay, it may not be correct, so it's usually on my end. All right, so let's go ahead and begin today's live stream. So I've already created 2 data pages. To begin, I have a report that's filtering data for today's date, and I've also built this submission form so that we can add new contacts. So let me show you how I created this report here in Caspio. So we're going to open up my contact management system. We're going to go to data pages, and let's take a look at this report. We're going to hit next, next, and then I'm using a predefined criteria to filter my data using a date field. So my table contains a date field, okay? And then on the next screen, I'm using a comparison type today. So in the date field, we have a lot of different comparisons that we can choose. You can do today, current week, current month, year, and then you can also customize if you want previous number of days, next number of days to display your data. For this specific one, I'm using today. I'm also sorting my data based on the date field to show me the most recent submissions first. Okay, and I have disabled the details page. Of course, you can enable the details page if needed too. So that's why on the front end, when you're looking at my report, you're able to see the data for today. All right, so here's today's date. I have a lot more data inside that table, but I'm filtering based on today's date. Now, let's say you wanted to combine that with one more criteria. So not just a filter based on the date field. What if I wanted to filter based on, let's say, my status field to only show me the leads for today's date? If I go back a few steps, Okay, I can include another comparison. So let's go ahead and include the status field to the right. So now we have two different criteria. On the following screen, I can set my status to equal to a lead. Okay, you can also use wildcards if you wanted to. All right, so if I save my changes now, the correct behavior now on the front end is to no longer display this because we're looking at today's date and that the status equals to a lead. So if I filter this out, you will see no records found. Okay. You can also edit that report. And using the logic tab, you can actually set this to or. So now it's going to show you all of today's contacts or that the status equals to a lead. Okay, so if I click finish and refresh, now you will see all of today's data or that the status equals to a lead. All right, let's go ahead and revert back to what we had before. In the logic tab, I'm going to set that back to end. What if I wanted to include one more? Let's say we have a checkbox to make items be action required. Okay, so anything that equals to a lead or today, or that it's action required, meaning there's some action that needs to be done on that specific contact. So I can go back to my table, and here's my data. All right. I have about 58 entries inside that table. Let's say I were to add a new field to my table called action required. And I set that data type to a checkbox. Save my table, go back to the data sheet tab, and let's go ahead and just flag a few of these rows as action required. I don't know which ones I'm actually clicking on, but we're going to have maybe 6, 7, or 8. All right, so now I know that these contacts have an action required to them. So I'm going to go back to my data pages, edit my today's report, and let's go ahead and include that field inside as a criteria. And then you can approach this a couple of different ways. You can actually select that field and then just show me all of the ones that are action required. But if you leave it as is, it's going to use an AND logical operator across all three of these criteria, meaning that I need it to equal today, status equals to a lead, and that it's action required. So if you leave it like this, it's not going to display you any data. It's going to say no records found on the report, right? So if I click finish and refresh, you're going to see no records found. But what if I want this to have today's date and a lead, or that it's action required? So once again, we can go back inside our Logics tab. Okay, and then you can do something like this. Let's say this is or. We're going to include one more and element, and I want these two to be together. So now what's going to happen inside this report, I want today's date and that the status equals to a lead, or anything that's action required. So if I click finish and I refresh my report, now you're going to see the results correctly because I'm looking for today's date and that it's a lead or that it's action required. Okay. So using the Logics tab, you have a lot of freedom and flexibility to customize what data is displayed using a predefined report. Okay. Now I'm actually going to go back and just revert back to what I had originally, which is just the status field. Sorry, it's just date field that equals today. So let me fix that. Hit next a few times, and I'm just going to exclude my status field and my action required. So I only want to filter based on today's date. Click finish, refresh, and once again, we're back to that one contact that has today's date. Now, what if I wanted to display contacts for this week? Okay, right now I don't have that data page deployed on my website. So let's go back to data pages, and let's say we wanted to make a copy of this one. So we're going to create a duplicate. All right, and we can call this week contacts. We're going to hit save. So I made a copy of it. Okay, it's an exact clone. I do need to make a few modifications to this data page. So let's click edit. Hit next, and the only modification that I want to make is for my comparison type to be set to this week or current week. All right, so this is going to include all of the data for the current week. We're going to hit finish. You can also hit preview if you'd like to see what that looks like. All right, so here are all the ones for current week. Okay, we're going to hit finish to save. And just like all of the other data pages, Caspio uses the embed deployment method that we can use to publish that data page to our website. So we copy a snippet of code. You can go into your website, and for this week, let's drag over the embed code and paste our Caspio code and hit publish. And now on the front end, we're going to be able to see today's contacts and all the contacts for this week. You can also do this month. All you need to do is just make a copy of your existing data page. All right, so let's copy this one, create a duplicate, and we can call this month's contacts. Click edit, and very quickly, we can just change the comparison type to say current month and hit finish. Let's deploy. Same process. We're going to copy our code. Let's go back to Weebly. Go to this month. All right. And let me remove this default widget and include the embed code. Paste. Publish. And now we have 3 different reports filtering data just for today, this week, and this month. Okay, so if you imagine if you have, let's say, a mega menu on the top part of your website, and let's say this reads reports, okay, or contacts. You have a submenu that shows up, and then you have different links that you can click on, but each link will take you to a predefined report so you can quickly access your data without really having to search, okay? Because when you go to search, then you have to manually select your dates. I want this specific range from today, maybe for the end of the week, but this allows you to quickly access the data if you're building predefined reports. And there's so many different ways to customize the reports, predefined reports, using that logics tab, okay, by using those and or logical operators. Now let's go ahead and build a search interface. So we're going to build a new data page. Again, you can always make a copy of your data pages. You don't have to start from scratch. If you have an existing data page that's very close to what you're hoping to develop, you can just make a copy of it. Okay, so you don't have to double your work and your effort. So here we can call this search contacts. However, I do need to make a few modifications to this one, so we're going to click edit. One thing that you want to keep in mind when you're building reports, you always want to understand what type of data you have in the table. For example, if you have short answers for like first name, last name, email, phone number, typically my preference is to use a tabular format because the data is going to be a summary of the data and it's going to be in rows and columns, right? So you're going to have a lot of cells, kind of like an Excel file, okay? So my preference is to always use tabular. However, if you have comments, if you have description fields, and you have a lot of text data inside a cell, then my preference has always been to either use list or gallery so that I can read the text. Because if you're using a tabular format for comments, then your report could look skewed. Okay, it won't look right unless you're using the truncate option to show and hide the additional text. Right, so for example, if you have, let's say, logs, email logs, phone logs, I typically use a list data page for that. All right, so let's go with the tabular format. I don't have any long text. We're going to hit next. All right, this is my data source. I don't need to make any more changes here. I'm just going to click next. And this time, I don't want to have a predefined criteria. I would like to build a search interface. And then you can now decide how do you want to display your data on the results page. Do you want them to appear below the search form, on a new page after you click search? And if you select this option here below the search form, I want to display my results on the initial load, meaning when you load the browser, you're immediately displaying the results underneath the search form. Okay, so let's hit next. Now let's include some search fields. Okay, so it's up to you what search fields you'd like to include in the results page or in the search form, but let's keep it simple. We're going to have first and last name. Okay, let's also take a look at the deal size. All right, let's have the company name. Let's also have the status, and maybe we can do a date range and also search any item that's action required. Okay, meaning I have to get to that item. Let me make sure I can find it. Okay, so I can quickly respond to that action required item. We're going to hit next. And now let's modify all of the search fields. Now, when I build my reports initially, I don't usually go through and and modify my search fields right away. I keep everything as is, and then I come back later on. That's just my preference, the way I like to go about building my reports. I'll keep it the way it is. I won't make any modifications. I'm going to hit next. Here are my results. I'm going to keep my results here as is, so I'm not going to make any modifications here. We're going to hit next. You can choose if you want your end users to have the ability to edit data on the report side. Okay, so here you can do inline insert, inline edit, grid edit. It's completely up to you if your end users need the ability to edit the data. In today's example, we're going to keep everything as read only. In other words, display only. Okay, I'm not going to make any modifications to my results page. I'm going to keep this the way it is for now. Let's display 25 contacts per page. I don't have too many entries inside that table. I think I have about 60. And no details page. Of course, you could enable a details page if you need to drill into each record. So let's hit finish. Let's deploy the data page. Grab our embed code, copy it, back to Weebly, and let's deploy that right over here. Publish. And let's take a look at it. Let's go to search. The reason why I like to modify my search fields at a later time is because I'd like to see what it looks like initially when it's embedded into my web page. And then once I see how much content I have to work with, then I can figure out how many columns I want to have in my search form. Do I want to place my labels on top of the fields, inside the fields, and how do I go about laying out the different types of fields that my search form might have. Okay, so looking at this, I don't mind if my labels are actually on top of the fields and I create 6 or maybe 7 different columns, because I don't like this. To me, this is just wasted space. Okay, I want to be able to bring up the report maybe up a little bit higher and have all of my search fields on a single row. So that's a very simple modification. We can actually go ahead and edit that. And let's go ahead and just use the section here and say number of columns to be, for now, let's have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because this is going to require 2 fields, 8. All right, so I'll do that. I can hit preview now to see what it looks like. All right. Now what I can do is put the labels on top of my fields. So to do that, we're going to position the labels on top of the fields. Hit preview. Okay. So you can see how I'm extending here a little bit past the edge of my results page. So to shrink this, I usually try to change the width of my fields to bring this in a little bit. Okay. But before I do that, I know that my date field is going to be a date range. Okay, so I'm going to come back here and say for date, I want to include a new criteria, which creates 2 additional fields underneath. I want to use the logical operator AND because I want the first criteria and the second criteria. And for criteria 1, we'll just say from. This can be greater than or equal to. And criteria 2 is going to be 2, less than or equal to. Well, let me see what that looks like in preview. Now you can see how this extends even more than before. So now what I will do is my date fields are not going to be that big, right? So you can see how much wasted space I have here next to my date field. So I know I can change the width of my date fields to be less wide. Okay, so I will come over here in the standard tab and I will say, instead of characters, I usually like to use pixels and maybe 100 pixels for both criteria 1 and criteria 2. So let me see. Let's hit preview. Okay, that's a little bit smaller. Let me just see what it looks like when I add my date. As you can see, I need a little bit more space there, so I'll come back and change that to maybe 140 pixels. Hit preview. And it's just a matter of going back and forth until you find the right width that you would like to have. And you can see how we're slowly bringing this back, because I usually like to have everything line up evenly. My status field is going to become a drop-down. I have 3 different statuses. We have leads, we have customers, and we have prospects. So I'll come back to that field, status, and I'll just simply say this to be a drop-down. Okay. I always like to use both custom values and lookup table, because under custom values, I would like to be able to search any status. Make sure I delete the value, because you're not really looking for that. And because I only have 3 statuses, I could build a lookup table if I wanted to. I'm just going to add my own custom values here. We have leads, we have prospects, and we have customers. Let's hit preview. All right, you can see how that field is now automatically less wide because it's no longer a text field. When you create a dropdown, it usually automatically adjusts to width based on what values you have in that dropdown, right? So if I now scroll to the right, you can see how we're getting there. We're almost aligned evenly here. Let's see what other changes we can make here. One thing that you may not be aware of for deal size, you can also do a custom range. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. So let's come over here. Deal size, and say we select Listbox. When you select Listbox, your comparison type is going to have this option available called range. And now you can create your own custom range. So if you want to quickly find deal sizes from 0 to, let's say, 1,000, you click search, it's going to list all of those results. Or let's say from 1,000 to 5,000, it's going to quickly find that data for you. So let's try something like this. From $0 to, let's say, $2,000. So this is going to be display. Sorry, let me just fix this. Okay, so that's what it's going to be displayed. And then the range is going to be from 0 to 2,000. Let's create one more. So let's go with 2001 all the way until maybe 5,000. And my range is going to be from 2001 to 5,000. And then let's do one more here. I want to show everything above 5,000. So you can say something like this, 5,001 plus, meaning that anything above 5,001. And then the range can be from 5,001 all the way, and just put a fictitious number here, almost like an infinite number that you can never hit. All right, so now it's going to look from 5,001 all the way until this figure here. So when you hit preview, okay, it looks something like that. That's the deal size. Now, again, this is wasted space for me, so I can come back here to my advanced tab, and I can just say display 3 at a time, hit preview, and it's not as long anymore. So now if I want to filter my data, I can just select show me all the values from 2001 to 5,000, hit search, and it's going to list you all of those deal sizes within that range. Okay, let me take a look. I'm actually pretty happy right now. I also want to actually display one more custom value here at the top to return all the entries. So if I'm not doing a range, let me come back here to the deal size, custom values. Let me just think for a second. There is a way to display everything by default. I'm just going to do, what can we call this? Let me try all from 0 to any number here. We're going to move this to the top, and let's put that to be default. Okay, so let's try that. Hit preview. Okay. I'll have to play around with that because I need to figure out how do I actually display from 0 all the way, because I want to be able to display all of my data as well, unless I'm doing something different. Let me just see the status field. Logic, let me take a look. Yeah, this is all okay. I don't need to make any changes here. Bear with me for a second. Deal size, display all, range from 0 all the way to the infinite number. It should have actually displayed everything, but I'll play around with that later. That's not a big deal for now. I just wanted to show you different ways of using the range so that you can quickly pull up those entries. Let's see what other modifications we can make. So if I hit preview, let's just say for last and first name, right now we have a very simple using equal in order to find the entry from the database. If I'm looking for somebody named Tom, I have to type in TOM, click search to find that entry from the database. Okay. Let me see if somebody posted something in the chat window. Yeah, there's a question here that came in. What is the width of a pixel? I just play around until my field fits. Yeah, so pixel is, you have more control in terms of the width with pixels. It's more precise, I would say. So just think like it really just moves the field width slightly using a pixel increment. So that's usually why I like to do that, because I can fine tune it and make it more precise using the pixel measurement. Okay. All right, let me come back here and show you different ways of how we can actually pull data from the table using what we call autocomplete. So under first name, text field. Right now you can see I'm using a text field for my search element. But let's say we do something like autocomplete. Okay, autocomplete works like Google search, right? So if you say this is my table, my first name, you can do begins with or you can do contains. It's going to look for any character within that string of characters for the first name. So if you leave it like this and you click preview, now if you type in the letter inside the search fields, it's also going to provide you options from the table that contain letter A. Okay, so it's a nicer, quicker way to find the entries if you don't know the exact name. You can also do the same thing for last name. So let's say last name here, we do autocomplete, which I use quite frequently, contains. And now if I'm happy with the preview, I can now hit finish and refresh my website and just to see all the changes that we've applied. Okay, again, you can see how my fields are expanding here to the right, so I do need to make a few modifications. Maybe we can make the company name field less wide. Same thing with first and last name. So let's do that. Let's make a few more modifications until all of our fields fit inside the container. So we'll come back here, and let's say for search contacts, first name, let's change the field width to pixels, and I'll use maybe 150 pixels for first and last name. Same thing. And then for the company name, let's also do the same thing for company. We'll use pixels, and we'll do not characters, pixels, and we'll do 150. All right, let's hit save. Okay, so we're almost there. Yes or no, and then I need to see what this actually says. I'm not sure what the full name here is. So let's go ahead and see what else we can make a change to. Maybe we can still make our date fields a little bit less wide. At a certain point, if you run out of the container width, you might actually have to have a wider website container to fit everything in, or you can exclude some of the search fields. Just to make things easier for us today, I'm going to exclude this field here, company name. So let me remove that from my search form. We're going to hit edit, and I will just remove the company name field from the search, hit finish, refresh, and let's take a look. Okay, so this says any. So now everything should work correctly, okay, except for the fact that I'm only seeing 7 records, which is not correct. I should be able to see everything from my database. Oh no, there's a reason why. It's because by default, you can see here it's set to yes. So that was the mistake. I forgot to look at my checkbox. So by default, when you have a checkbox in the table, on the search form, it's going to convert that into a radio button option, and you can see by default it's set to yes. Let me quickly fix that. Have the default be set to any. Here's my action required, and let's have any be defaulted to, and hit finish. Now it should work the way it's supposed to. And you can see we see the entire database. If I wanted to do a range, let's say 2,000 to 5,000, it's going to return those entries within that range. And I also want to be able to see all of those entries with action required. Click search, and you can see how we can continue to filter down our data. Now, I had actually a question come up in a previous stream. When you're clicking search, I want to be able to have a reset button that I can click on to reset everything, return all the records, and bring back everything to default without me having to manually select that, click any, and then click search. A simple way to do this is to just grab the URL to your page. Okay. Then let's go back to our data page and click edit. And this is what I've done in the past. We go back to the search form. Let's include an HTML block. Just going to move that HTML block underneath. Actually, I think in this case, it's probably better to use a header and footer because this is going to be placed as a column in my search form. So let me go ahead and remove that, and let's add a header and footer. And in the footer section, I'm going to create a very simple hyperlink here. Let's call the text reset search. Highlight the text, click on the link button here at the top, and just put the URL to that page. And then click OK. And now it becomes a clickable link. You can modify this to have it look like a button if you want to, using a very simple inline CSS. We're not going to do that. I'm just going to click Finish to save my changes, refresh. And now I have this reset search. I can left align this. I can position this link anywhere I want. I can put it side by side. We talked about this in one of our previous live streams, where you can create custom buttons. So now if I'm searching my data, okay, so there it is. And if I just reset the web page, it should bring back everything to how it was before I searched my data. So that's a simple workaround if you wanted to have a reset search option inside the search form. Okay. Is there a way in Weebly to make the width of the page bigger? When I deploy a page, there isn't enough room. Yeah, there is a way to do that inside Weebly. I just need to remember where to go in order to do that. Let me see if I can quickly find it for you. I know for a fact there is a way. Let me just think for a second. Is it under Pages? No. Is it under Theme? Theme options change. Oh, here it is. Edit HTML and CSS. All right, so I need to explore this a little bit more to see exactly where I need to change the width. This is something I might have to take offline, but I know for a fact that I've done this before myself. I would just need to explore it a little bit more. I've done this before, okay? So I promise it can be done, where I can actually make the width of this container much wider so I can fit more elements inside that container. But I need to figure out where exactly I need to go. It may be the body of my content. So if I did, let's just try something here. Style equals, it's just been a while, okay? Width, maybe, I don't know, how about 1500 pixels? Okay, and then we close that. I don't know if you can notice, but it's actually in real time making modifications to my web page here as well. Let me save. All right, and then let me publish, and I don't know if I did anything with that. I'll just have to go back to it and figure out where to edit the CSS. But it actually, I believe it did that for me. I just need to come back here. Let me take a look. Theme, edit HTML, CSS, header. I just did this recently too. I need to figure out where exactly I need to apply the style width to change the width of that page. Okay, but I know it can be done. Okay. So let me take a look at a few of my questions that I'm getting here, and then we'll move on to the next report that I have. Okay. I would like to concatenate first and last name to create a full name field and use it in search. Okay, so that is actually something that can be done. You can use the formula data type to concatenate, but you're not going to be able, I don't believe that you're going to be able to use that as the search field. You're still going to have to use first and last name as your search fields, but in the results page, you can display the full name if you wanted to. Okay, so if I go back to my table very quickly, and I look at my table design, you can see I had the first and last name by itself in my data set. Okay. I can concatenate that into its own field to combine both of those values together as a full name. So if I move this underneath my last name, I can use a formula data type, click on the edit link here to the right, and then I can include my first name. I can combine that with my last name. And then a little bit of syntax is needed here. You can't just add a space between the first and last name. That's going to give you an invalid formula. So to create that space, you use a plus sign, apostrophe, space, apostrophe, and a plus sign. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste that in the chat window so everyone else can use. Okay. Come back here, verify the formula. It looks good. We hit apply, and now we save the table, and you're going to be able to see how both the first and last name are now combined as a full name. Very helpful if you're dealing with names, because sometimes when you're sending an SMS or an email alert, you may want to just use the first name to address them. But on the report side, instead of displaying two different columns, you can have one column to display the full name. Okay, so I could go back to my data page, click Edit. Next, next, next. Now, as I said in the search form, let me take a look at my options here for full name. Well, you might actually be able to do that. I don't think this was available before. Maybe this is new, but let's say we include the full. Let me try it. Let's say we include the full name. Let's do contains. And then in that case, I don't really have a need for first and last name in my search form. I could actually now remove those two and just use the full name. Let's do that. Okay, and I'll once again use autocomplete with contains. Yeah, no, you can see here that we don't have the ability because it defaults to the contact ID. So there is no way to use the formula data type in the search. I could use this in the results page, but I'm still going to have to use the first and last name in the search separately. Okay, so no way to search against the formula data type in the table. Because right now you can see that filter autocomplete by contact ID. So that's not going to be correct. It's just going to list the IDs in the search form. Let me hit preview. Okay, it's showing me the IDs. But on the results page, you could include the full name. Okay, and then when you include the full name in the results page, you could remove the first and last name. Okay, so click here, preview, and now you see the full name as opposed to just first and last name. I'm just going to fix my search interface really quickly here. Just bear with me for a second. I do want to have my first and last name included. One little trick here, if you haven't noticed this before, but you can hit Control on the keyboard to select multiple items, and then you can move them up and down together. No need for full name. Let's remove it. And I'm just going to go back to this being autocomplete. And then after this, we need to move on to the next topic because I still have quite a few things to show you. So let's do contains. Okay, that looks good. Last name, autocomplete contains, and click finish and refresh. All right. And again, I need to modify my first and last name to be on top of the fields. You can also include these labels inside the fields if you'd like. All right. Let me see if I can quickly answer a few more questions. Do we have to purchase the extension in order to get the Listbox range option? No, you don't have to do that. It should be available immediately on any plan. Okay, if I figure it out, let me go ahead and copy here on my end and paste that here on my side. I'm going to use that. All right. I will figure it out. I've done it before. I just don't have the time to inspect that at the moment. Okay? All right. Okay, so I'll try it. I'll try that later with the virtual field. Again, there's so many different ways to look at it. Maybe on the submission form we can include the search field, or maybe even here. Let me take a look. Maybe there is a way to include that, but I will go ahead and look at that later. Full name contains, well, maybe there is. What do you know? Sometimes I learn something new as well. Full name. Let me hit preview. Full name. Okay, there you go. Didier, thank you for that. So use the virtual field in order to connect to that full name field in our table, and that will allow us to do it. Okay, so if you do maybe TA, click search, it should return all the full names that contain TA. But I'll have to check on that because, let me hit search one more time because it's not doing anything here unless I didn't do something correctly here in my other search fields. Okay, that's something I'll have to explore offline using the virtual field. But let's move on to the next topic because we do have quite a few more content to get through, okay? And I only have 20 minutes. So the next thing we're going to look at is how do we take, let me close a few of these tabs. How do we convert something that looks like this using Caspio standard features, where we have basic text, we have our LinkedIn and Twitter profile, social handles, and how do we convert that to look something that's a little bit more presentable? Okay, so let me switch applications here. And let's go to my physicians directory, data pages, and let's click edit. Let's navigate to the results page. And remember what we learned in one of our previous live streams is that you can put all of the fields as parameters inside an HTML block and wrap those fields using some inline CSS and HTML to dress up those data points. So to do that, we just need to insert an HTML block. And inside that HTML block, you can go into the source to insert all of your fields as parameters and code your inline HTML and CSS until the desired look and feel is met. Now, one thing that I always like to do is disable the toolbar and just start coding my own HTML in here. And one of the first things that I'd like to do is have the ability to center everything. So I want to be able to center all of my data values inside this box. As you can see right now, everything is left aligned. So my preference is to create a very simple center tag and then just have a closing one here at the end too. And any content that I place in between these two center tags is going to be centered inside that container. Okay. So one thing that I want to start off with, usually when I build these types of reports directories, is an image. So profile image of that person. Okay. So we're going to do a simple image source tag equals, and then we're going to be able to insert the field. I already have that field in my table called image, and I want that to be a file URL, which is the URL to that image. Okay. Simple enough. All right, let's make sure we have our quotes around that URL, and then let's set the width to maybe equals 125 pixels. All right, and we're going to close that image tag. So now I can, once I include that image here inside the HTML block, I don't really have a need for it as a field in my results page. I can delete that now because I'm including that inside the HTML block. At any point, we can hit preview to see what modifications we're making, and now you can see how that image is centered inside this container. Okay, let's create a heading for our first name and last name. All right, you can see what it's supposed to look like. I want that to be in blue, I want it to be a little bit bigger, and I want that to be centered. So underneath the image source tag, we're going to include a very simple H2 tag for our heading, and then let's apply some inline styling to it. So we'll say color, and I've actually picked a color for today's class. It's going to be a blue color 01882B, or sorry, 018BB2. If you guys would like your own hex colors, your own custom colors, you can always go to the one that I shared before, which is HTML color codes, and using this simple kind of a wheel looking thing, you can change the color to whatever you want, and you would just simply grab the hex color that you would like to include. Okay, after that, let's go ahead and create something else here. Let's do a font weight. So I want the weight of my font to be a little bit thicker, so we're going to use 600. Let's have font size be 18 pixels. I want the name to be a little bit bigger. All right, and then we're going to just go ahead and insert the name field as a parameter, and we can close our H2 tag. All right, so simple heading. I'm applying some inline style. That's the color, that's the font weight, font size, and I think that's all I want to do. Once I hit preview now, I'll be able to see what that looks like. Since I now have the name as a parameter here inside the HTML block, I can remove it from here. And let's hit preview. And now you can see the image and the name directly underneath. Okay, now let's position the website. Let's put the website underneath the name. Let's center it. So back inside the HTML block. And for this, because I want to be able to control some spacing, top and bottom of my website link, I want to create a div. Div is simply a container where you can put elements. You can put different elements inside that container, and then you can change the different aspects of that content that's inside that div. So you can put padding, you can put margins, you can position content, layout content the way you want. For this one here, we're going to do a simple style equals, and then we're going to use margin. And I've already kind of figured out in advance what kind of margins I would like to have. So we're going to have -7 pixels on the top, and you'll see in just a second what that's going to look like. 0 pixels, 0 pixels, and 0 pixels. So top is going to be -7, so it's going to move my website link a little bit higher. And all the other pixels, right, bottom, and left, is just going to be 0, okay? And let's go ahead and just inside that div, we're going to have a simple ahref equals. And for ahref, if we have the website provided by the user, let's say on the registration form, we can insert that website as a field, right? So now, as soon as people click on that link, it's going to take them to that website because I already have the URL stored in my table, okay? So let's close the quotation, and let's go ahead and apply some styling here as well. Color can be 3.3, A1, C1. So it's just a different shade of blue. Font size can be 12 pixels. And I think that's all we want to do here. Let's close it and let's give it a name. View website. And close the A tag. And we also want to close the div tag too. Okay, so simple like that. So let's take a look. Let's hit preview. All right, now you can see how my website is slightly closer to my name. If I actually change that back to 0 pixels, so I don't use -7, let's say 0, and I hit preview, you will see more spacing between the first name and the website, which is still fine if that's what preference you have, but my preference is to move that a little bit closer to the name. So let me just put that to be back to -7. All right. Okay, so now that we have our website included inside the HTML block, again, I can remove these fields one at a time. All right, next thing we're going to add is simply another div, because now I want to be able to manage the top and bottom margins from both my phone and also the hospital that I have. So let's do a simple div, same as before, div style equals margin, and we're going to do 15 pixels on the top, 0 pixels, 10 pixels, and 0 pixels, meaning above my content there's going to be spacing of 15 pixels, and below my content there's going to be spacing of 10 pixels. Now inside this div container, we're going to create a simple span. Okay, now span is just a generic inline container for phrasing content. Okay, you can do inline style to it, any kind of text that you want to manipulate. You can just use a very simple span tag. Okay, so style equals, and then we're going to do font weight to be bold. All right, let's also do font size to be 12 pixels. Color can be slightly darker. Okay, and then we're going to just say in all caps phone, because I want my label to be in all caps. Okay, then I'm going to close my span tag, and now this text is going to basically be in bold, 12 pixel size, and color is going to be black. All right, and then after that, let's have another span, style equals, and then we're going to do font size to be 12 pixels, color can be 444. All right, and then we're going to now include the phone field right after that. So let's include the phone field, and let's close our span tag. Now, very simple. You don't have to retype all of this if you don't want to, okay? You can just copy it and use it for the other field that you have. So copy that, paste that directly underneath, and then this label now is no longer phone. I want this to be hospital. All right, and for your field that you want to insert here is not going to be phone. It's actually going to be field hospital for the hospital name. Okay, so now we can exclude the phone field. We can delete the hospital field because I'm including both of those values inside the HTML block. When I hit preview, you can see what it looks like. All right, I need to check to see why this is not showing up in bold. So let me come back here. It needs to have a semicolon here, not a comma, semicolon. All right, you can also include a colon afterwards if you'd like, colon here, not after the field name, but the actual label. If you want to do something like this, you can. Let's hit preview. All right, and now you can see the phone in bold, the label, the hospital, and the data populating right after that. Now we have our social media handles here. We have the LinkedIn profile and Twitter, and I want these to be in icons as opposed to the actual link. So underneath this, underneath our div, all right, we're going to go ahead and include two Href tags. Okay, so when you click on the image, it's going to take the user to that profile, the LinkedIn profile or the Twitter profile. Okay, so we're going to use Href. Let me just do this so it's a little bit clear. Href equals, and then in between the quotes, we're going to insert the field for, let's begin with LinkedIn. Okay, so imagine on the registration form, a profile form, your end user inputs their URL to their LinkedIn profile. We're going to have that value inside a table, and now when people click on that link or that image, it's going to take the user to that URL. Okay, if you want that to be opened up in a new window, so in a new tab when people click on that icon, okay, you want to use target equals, and then in between the quotes, you want to do something like this, underscore blank. All right, so that's what's going to open up a new tab in the browser. So when you click on the link, it's going to take me to the LinkedIn profile. Now let's have image source tag equal sign, and then in between the quotes, you can grab any URL to any LinkedIn icon on the web if you'd like. I already have one that I found on Google. Let me just go ahead and copy it. It's just where this icon is being hosted. If I click on and show you, there's my LinkedIn icon. It's just a URL to that icon. So then back in the data page, I can go ahead and paste that like that. Okay, let's close the quotations. And then afterwards, all you need to do here is now either if you want, you can close it, or you can set the width to be a little bit smaller. So you could say width equals maybe 25 pixels for that icon. Close it, close the A tag. And now, again, instead of retyping all of this again, you can just copy it, paste that underneath, and instead of going to LinkedIn, we now want to go to Twitter. So let's include the field for Twitter URL like this. And instead of this image for LinkedIn, we need to replace that with a LinkedIn icon. So I have that already. So let me go ahead and, with a Twitter icon. So we're going to copy that, and let me paste that here in between the quotes. All right, and let's hit preview. And now you're going to be able to display those two icons. Again, once you have the icons displayed, you can now remove both of those two fields. So just come over here and say delete, and delete. And the last step is to create the button to the details page. Okay, again, I'm going to put a div here so that I can control the top margin and the bottom margin of my buttons. I could have also created another div around my two links here if I wanted to, if I needed more spacing to the top and bottom of my social media icons. I didn't do that, okay? So let's do style equals margin. Let's do 20 pixels on the top. Let's do 0 pixels, 15 pixels, and 0 pixels. And then we're going to say here Href equals, and for right now, I don't really have a URL to take the user to, but if you had a details page, details data page built in Caspio, once you click on that link, you are redirected to that details page. Okay, style equals, and let's customize our button to have border equals 1 pixel solid, and then we're going to use kind of a dark gray, so B4 color. Okay, padding around our text inside the button can be 10 pixels, 20 pixels. This is all standard stuff. And then afterwards, let's have a background color of the button to be white. So we're going to use FFF. Color of the text can be darker, so let's have 777. That's the color of my text. It's going to be darker. And then let's also include a margin of 20 pixels, 0 pixels, 5 pixels, and 0 pixels, with the width of the button to be 100 pixels. And then we're going to close that. And now for my text, the actual button text is going to read view profile. And then we can close the A tag for our link, and we can close the div tag. And that's it. Okay, so if I hit preview now, all right, there's my button. I think I still need to modify a little bit more, maybe include, actually, I don't think I need this margin inside here. We can remove that. I don't think that's needed. Let me go ahead and see what that looks like. Okay, so yeah, that's not needed, but I can add more padding around that text if I wanted to fix that. Right now it's just 2 pixels because I forgot the extra 0 here. So if I hit preview, now it's starting to look a little bit more like a button. So if I were to click on anything here inside this button, it would take me to the details page, data page that I built in Caspio. Okay. And then finally, all you will need to do is just hide this details page. You don't need to have this be visible. And you can do that in the style. If you wanted to create a round edge around the button, you can do that as well. You can do something like this, where you just come anywhere here and you can say border radius can be maybe 5 pixels. And you're going to be able to see a round edge around the button. Okay? So if you wanted to continue to style that. And that's how usually I go about making my reports look a little bit nicer for the front end, is by using that HTML block and feeding all of my data inside the HTML block as parameters, and then just wrapping that around with some simple, very simple HTML and inline CSS. Okay? So hopefully that was helpful on that report. Let's move on to the very last topic. I have a few minutes left, so let's make sure we complete that today as well. And the last topic that I have is very simple. How do we modify our status field to change the background color of the status based on the status itself? So if it's a customer, maybe it can be green. If it's a lead, it might be, I don't know, yellow. And if it's a prospect, we have like an orangish reddish color. So to do something like that, which is a very popular question that comes up quite a bit. It's just to give it a nice visual aesthetic to the report. So let's see how we can do that. Let me hit finish. And let's switch applications here. Go back to data pages and let's take a look at the standard one that I have. And let's navigate to the results page. So we're going to have to use an HTML block once again. Okay, inside that HTML block, you can place your JavaScript, your HTML, your CSS. So let's include an HTML block. Again, I'm going to disable the HTML editor. And the first thing that you would need to do is create a unique ID for the status field. Okay, so again, we're going to use a span tag and we're going to say ID equals and then row. And then you include your contact ID field, which is the unique field in the table, like this. Close the quotations and then you're going to say field name status. Okay, and then close the span tag. All I've done here is created an ID, okay, for my status field. So when I do my JavaScript, I can call that ID and apply a different style to my status field. Okay, so underneath that, we're going to create a script, and we're going to also need a closing script. And then this is a very simple conditional if, right? So then in parentheses, status. So if status, go ahead and says equals to a, let's say, lead. All right, and we're going to close our parentheses, and then in between the squiggly brackets that we need to create. All right, let me just explain here. So if status equals to a lead, so if this equals to a lead, what we need to add here is document get element by ID. Okay, and then capitalization is very important here. Okay, document get element by ID. We're trying to get the ID, this one here that we've created. Okay, get element by ID. We're going to put that in parentheses. So row, and then you can include your contact ID field. All you're doing is basically copying this ID that we created. And then quotes, close the parenthesis, and then you need to apply a style to it. Okay, and to do that, you're going to add a dot here, style, color, and then equal sign. And for the color, I'm going to use a darker color, 444. Okay. So the get element ID allows us to access an HTML element in our document. Okay. So let me just make sure this is clear one more time. So if the status equals to a lead, document get element by ID. So we're grabbing this ID here and we're just applying a different color to our status field. Okay. So style color equals, and that's going to be the color. Now, instead of you rewriting all of that again, you can just make a copy of it, paste it underneath, because I want to be able to apply different attributes, different styles to my status field. And the next one maybe that you want to do is style, not color, but let's say we wanted to do font weight to equals to. Actually, I need to make sure I close my quotes here so that it works properly. Okay, And then font weight can be 500, so it's a little bit thicker. Again, you can just continue to copy that and paste that underneath. And then for underneath font weight, why don't we have maybe background color, or you can do something else if you wanted to. Background color. And then for the background color, let's have the hashtag FFF999, okay, which is going to be a yellowish color. All right, so instead of me going one line item at a time, I already have all of this created, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy it and show you what it looks like in the end. Once you've created all of your different styles for the status, all right, so we have our padding, which is going to be around the text. We have the border radius. We talked about border radius. It creates a round edge. The width is going to be 100 pixels. I want to display that as a block. Center my text inside the block, and then font size is going to be 13 pixels. Okay. So if status equals to a lead, we use the JavaScript here to apply a different color. After that, what you need to do here is a little bit different. Else if, so if field status, so let me go ahead and just include my status field. All right, we're going to close that. Sorry. Okay, equals to prospect now. All right, close. And then we need our squiggly brackets. And all you need to do is just repeat what you did here above. You can copy it, and really all we are doing here is just changing the background color. So you can copy the same exact styling that you had before, paste that here, and the color is just going to be different, the background color. And let's have the background color be FCBEA0, which is going to have, I think, that orangish, yellowish, or reddish color. Okay, and the final one, what we need here is also else if. So let's copy all of this, paste that one last time. So else if this is a customer, I want that to have a green color, so we're going to copy that. Let me go ahead and copy it that I have here on my other screen. We're going to paste that right over here. I know it looks daunting and challenging, but it's really not. All you're doing is just repeating the same steps. And then once you're done, you can click on the preview button and then cross your fingers that everything looks good. And as you can see, let me take a look. I probably messed up something. Script if lead, okay, else if status equals prospect. That's closed, else if customer contact ID. Just bear with me for a second. I don't need my status field because I'm included it here. I included it there in the results page, so inside the HTML block. Let me click finish and see what it looks like when it's done. I'm going to hit deploy here, copy my URL, and let's just see what that looks like. Okay, so it's not applying it. Let me take a look. Just need to inspect it a little bit here. See what I did wrong. Sometimes it can be off by a very simple like quotation or something like that. Span ID row, contact ID. I mean, that looks correct. Status span, nothing wrong with the ID. Script if status equals to a lead. Everything looks correct there. Closing bracket. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. We'll take a look at that suggestion, okay? So I appreciate that input, Northwest, okay? I know it can seem like you were lost taking a look at this, but it's really just looking at some advanced ways of customizing the reports. It's not necessary. This is really just a nice to have if you wanted to further modify the look and feel of your reports. We can use some simple techniques like HTML and CSS to do that. If anybody sees what I did wrong, let me know in the chat window. I'm just going to go through it slowly to see why. Get element by ID document. Get element by ID row. Else if status equals to prospect. else if status equals to customer. I don't see anything. I can't catch anything right now. Let me just take a look at it a little bit more. I'm just trying to compare it to what I have on the other screen. I guess I could actually just copy it from the other screen, but I would like to figure out on my own why it's not working. HTML results page. Well, let me grab the actual code that I wrote earlier. So let me copy it and paste it in here and hit preview. So that worked, but there was something that I did incorrectly just a second ago, which is unfortunate because everything looked correct. So I'm basically displaying my status field inside the HTML block, but I'm using the JavaScript to manipulate that status field by looking at this ID. So I'm grabbing this ID. So document get element by ID. So I'm getting this element by its ID, which is the contact ID, row contact ID, and I'm applying just a different color to that text. But I'm also adding additional attributes to it by applying a different background color, padding, radius to create that. Yeah, I wish I knew what I did wrong. I would probably have to go through it once again just to see if I missed a quotation somewhere or maybe misspelled something. So that's very important. Make sure you have your spelling down correctly and you have all of the quotes in order for that styling to be applied. If anybody wants to reuse this, the video is going to be available on our YouTube channel. I can even, if you guys would like to use it as is and just modify it slightly based on the fields that you have in your table. So if you have a status field and you have a unique ID, you can use this as is. Let me see what it looks like in the chat window so that you guys, oh no, I'm limited to only 200 characters. I cannot paste that in the chat window. But hopefully if you follow along with the video, you should be able to do this yourself very quickly, and that's going to give you that nice style on the status field where you have a background color. So now if I go to my details and I change this to maybe a customer, you can see a background color of green. Okay. All right. Well, I know it's a lot of information overload on today's live stream, but I'm just showing you all the different ways. If you do have some basic knowledge, especially with HTML, CSS, you can create some nicer looking data pages if you're dealing with gallery and list view. On a tabular side, we took a look at a few customizations on how we can have a search form have multiple columns using the range, using different other elements that are available on the data page wizard. Let me take a look at your questions now to see what I missed, and then we're going to be leaving today's live stream in about 5 or 10 minutes. Okay? So let's take a look at some of these questions. Also, Didier, thank you one more time for mentioning the virtual field. I didn't even think about that. I'm used to virtual fields on the submission form when I'm separating my search and the results. So it's nice to know that we can use that on the search form. Is there a website where it will help me write the HTML and then paste the code into Caspio? I use W3 Schools. I've learned so many things from W3 Schools. Okay. The reason why it's so helpful is you can learn HTML, you can learn CSS. So if you go to learn HTML, you can just go through each chapter. And what's nice about it is you can try it yourself in real time. Okay, so if we look at, I don't know, let's take a look at some basics here. You can learn about attributes, headings, heading 1, heading 2, but you can apply an inline style to each one of these headings if you'd like. Okay, so you can add your own styling to every single one of these tags, most of them. Okay, so you have a tag name and you do an inline style, and then you have the property and the value, right, which we looked at today in the previous live stream. Okay, usually I use divs, I use spans, I use tables. Those are my tags that and some headings too, like H2, H1. And I do an inline style to change the value of that specific property that I'm editing. So if I'm trying it myself, right, so here's what it looks like in real time. Okay, to visualize it, here are the 4 P's that we have here. I am normal, P style color red, so you can see why this is in red. But if you wanted to add another property, another value, let's say font size 20 pixels, all right, and you hit run, you can see how that changed the text size. If you do 40 pixels, just for fun, run it, you can see how much it's bigger. But I like it because it's in real time. You can do the testing, and then you can see what it looks like here on the right-hand side. Okay, I don't know if this will allow me to change the font family, but let's say we do Lotto. Okay, so it didn't allow me to do that, but if I do Tahoma, let's see what happens. Yeah, so that changed. Okay, you can see how the text changed to that font family. Okay, and instead of red, you know, as I mentioned, that color wheel that you can use to grab your own hex color, just use the hashtag. If you want this to be gray, maybe EEE, that's going to be a light gray. Okay. But this doesn't have to be P is for paragraph, right? So it creates the paragraph and it adds spacing automatically top and bottom. You can control that spacing. So if I wanted to do margin, by default, it's going to be 0 pixels like this. So there's 4 values that we look at when it comes to margin, padding. This is top, anything above it, to the right, to the left, to the bottom, and then to the left. So you work clockwise direction, right? So if I wanted to add more spacing between these 2 elements, I would just say 20 pixels, run it. Okay, no, it actually shrunk it. So let me see why. That's interesting. Let's do 40 pixels. Okay, let's do 400 pixels. All right, so you can see how it adds more spacing. So I added 400 pixels above I am red text. Let's see if we can do left. It allows me to do that. So if I do 100 pixels to the left, sorry, that's bottom. Take that back. This is left. All right, so top, right, bottom, left. Okay, you can see how I moved it to the right. Simply by adding a margin property and then the value associated with that property. Okay, so it's a simple inline CSS tutorial. So that's why I like it. You know, you can learn everything about HTML. You can learn everything about styles using W3 schools. Okay. And there are many properties and many values that you can apply to any tag that you select. Okay, there's its own course on CSS, also very helpful. Okay. All right, so thank you guys so much for attending the live stream this week as well. I know it's a lot of information, but the good news is that all of this is kept on our YouTube channel, so you can watch this video at a later time to see what I did if you wanted to replicate some of the things that we learned today, and wanted to give you a little bit of insight on how I go about building my reports depending on the data that I have inside a table. Right? So if it's a short answer like first name, last name, something simple, I always usually use tabular format. If I have a lot of text that I'm working with, I'll use either gallery or list. And then obviously pivot tables are there to aggregate our data. And then sometimes I may even use the combination chart and results. So if I go back, let's just save our changes here. And if I go back to our contact management system, okay, let me see if I have a page opened up here. Let's go back to cancel that. Publish. Let me go on my site. Search. Right, I'm going to find out for you the width, you know, of the Weebly. I know somebody asked that earlier today. Okay. Forgot what I was going to mention just now. I wanted to show you something, but I forgot what I wanted to show you. Great. But anyway, I'll just talk about just a little bit more here how I go about building my reports is choosing what kind of, in advance, what kind of data I have and how I'm going to display that data inside my data page. So for example, the search contacts, I can even turn that into a combination of a chart and a results page if I wanted to see a chart underneath my search form. Okay, so we can do something like that. I click next. It's going to ask me, you're modifying your data page. Some of the settings could be lost. We're just going to hit OK and navigate all the way to where I select my chart. All right, and now I need to ask myself, what kind of data do I have? Well, I know I can build a nice chart based on the status field. So if I did a pie chart, I can do a breakdown of all of the contacts based on status. So I could say next, let's say contacts by status. All right, and then for my category, it's going to be the status field. And then for value, all I'm going to do here is just do a sum. Not sum, sorry, we're going to do a count. So we're counting all of the contacts in the table that we have. All right, and we're going to use the category status to break down the contacts based on that status field. You can have that show as percentage. I'm not going to do that. We're just going to do a very simple count. Hit finish. And let's hit search. And now I have a pie chart. We can see I have 24 contacts that are customers, that are leads, and that are prospects. Okay. So all I did was basically combine the search form with the chart and the results page. Once again, there's so many different ways of customizing the results page and the search form. This is really just the tip of the iceberg of what you can do. I'm only given 1 hour for these live streams, but if there's something specific that you would like to see, something that you were struggling with on the search form or the results page, something that you wanted to see, let us know in the chat window. We will take your feedback, and if there's some way to plug that into the next live stream, I will go ahead and do that. Okay. The next live stream is going to be how to customize web forms. Okay. How we can create different positioning of our labels, how do we arrange our fields, different columns. I might even throw in some JavaScript in there. I'll definitely have some HTML and CSS. Okay. All right. Thank you, Northwest. I appreciate the feedback as always. That's always welcome. And for the rest of you who are still here, thank you so much for attending today's live stream. I'm going to go ahead and just close my screen for now. The live chat will remain open if you have any additional questions. But yeah, thank you so much again from me. Hope to see you again next week. And hopefully we can, build out the community and have more people join in and share these live streams with their friends so that we can have more people learn about the platform. All right. Thank you all. Have a good day. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.